Hello, everyone. We're getting everyone in from the waiting room here. Looks like that's everybody. All right, so welcome. Thank you all for joining us for this online artist talk. Today's presenter is Adam John Manley. This is presented by the Maloof. I am your host, Seth Pringle. I'm program manager at the Sam and Alfreda Maloof Foundation for Arts and Crafts. And we've been doing these online artist talks, since everything shut down, and we really appreciate your contributions to this, your donations to participate in this. We're trying to generate some revenues through these talks to make up for the fact that we are closed to tours, which we usually sell a bunch of tickets for. So thank you very much for that. We are hoping to reopen outdoor experiences soon. So stay tuned. But we're waiting to get more guidance from the governor. So we hope to see you in person for some garden and outdoor experiences. We'll be sending out announcements about that. So before we get into the talk, I want to start with a native land acknowledgement. The Sam and Alfreda Maloof Foundation for Arts and Crafts acknowledge the Tongva peoples as the traditional land caretakers of Tovangar, or the Tongva world. This area includes the Los Angeles Basin, South Channel Islands, San Gabriel and Pomona Valleys, and portions of Orange, San Bernardino, and Riverside counties. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work for the Taraxacom, or indigenous peoples in this place. As an institution located on unceded indigenous land, we pay our respects to Hanukvatam ancestors, Ahihiram elders, and Ivuhikem, our relatives and relations, past, present, and emerging. Yeah, we've got more people coming in from the waiting room. Welcome to you who are just joining us. So I'm going to introduce Adam in just a moment. So he's going to present a slideshow of his work. We'll follow that with a question and answer session. So we're going to do that through the chat box. You're welcome to write your questions in the chat at any time during the talk, and we'll save those for the end, and I'll read some of your questions to Adam at the end after he's done with his slideshow. Okay. So without further ado, Adam John Manley was born and raised in the Adirondack Mountains of New York State and attended the State University of New York in New Paltz, receiving a degree in political science and international relations. During this time, Adam fell in love with woodworking, founding a cooperative studio and gallery with a group of friends in Kingston in New York's mid-Hudson Valley. Having been raised by a weaver and a boat builder and carpenter, working with one's hands came naturally to Adam. After working for several years as a furniture maker and hoping to deepen his connections between making and ideas, Adam moved to San Diego, California, where he received his MFA in furniture design and woodworking. In graduate school, Adam developed a unique voice that blended functional construction methodologies, material exploration, and a focus on the conceptual potential embodied within craft, furniture, and functional familiar objects. Since completing graduate school, Adam has taught at numerous institutions, from colleges to craft schools, and continued to develop his ideas and work in an ever-evolving way. Adam's work has addressed issues relating to our unique sense of place and how familiar functional objects link us to that sense, humor, individual and universal relationships to furniture, and more recently, the relationship between furniture and the historical objects used to inflict violence on others throughout time. This work is currently Adam's focus and is expanding from an initial small solo exhibition at the Indianapolis Art Center to a more complete body of work forthcoming at the Houston Center for Contemporary Craft. He serves as board president of the Furniture Society, assistant professor of furniture design and woodworking at San Diego State University, and is co-founder and co-editor of Craft Desert, a zine project in collaboration with jewelry professor and artist Carrie Ann Quick. All right, it's all yours, Adam. There you go.
There it is. Thank you, Seth. And thank you so much for inviting me. It's really kind of an honor to be presenting through the Maloof, and I really appreciate the opportunity. I've been working for a little while now with Lauren Verdugo, who I believe is in here, who I know is an important member of your community there. And it's been great to get sort of closer with the Maloof over the last couple of years. I'm going to bring up my slideshow. Give me just a second. Share screen. Can everybody see that?
Looks good.
Okay. So thank you so much to the Maloof and to you, Seth, and for to everybody who's joined in. I see some really some familiar faces from all various points in my life, which is fantastic. I especially want to give a shout out. I see Jeff Johnson in this audience, and you mentioned my time at SUNY New Paltz and my political science degree, and my parallel passion at that time was my furniture classes, and Jeff was my first teacher in those classes. Probably Jeff told me first about who Sam Maloof was, in fact. So hi, Jeff. Thanks for being here. I'm going to give you a little bit of background, and then I'll kind of work through some projects. There's some chronological, it's mostly chronological, so I'll kind of end with the newer stuff, and I'd be happy to answer questions after that if you have any. Like Seth said, I started this journey in woodworking in the Hudson Valley when I was in college at New Paltz. And following college, I really started to explore it in more depth. I had a job for a local furniture maker and was lucky enough to kind of get to set up a group studio in Kingston, New York. And there we hosted exhibitions, and I got to kind of see what it was like to try to build a practice on my own while I was exploring how to also make money at it at the time. And I was working for a furniture maker named Josh Finn. And I remember actually at that time, he made a trip to Los Angeles and had the pleasure of going to the Maloof and getting to have a little bit of a tour from Sam himself. And it was kind of like a big moment for him when he came back and told me about that. Not long before he died, I think it was when he was out here. But at that time, I was really focused on studio furniture and kind of refining my skills as a woodworker and being a designer and maker. And there, I was in the program at SUNY New Paltz studying with Jeff Johnson, who's in the room. And I started realizing at some point that I was really more interested in kind of exploring the concepts that could be embedded in furniture and familiar functional objects than I was in kind of making product. I really enjoy making things in general, but at the time I was piecing together a life by doing commissions and working for a woodworker and really realizing that I think that I wanted to take this in a little bit of a different direction. So I attended a class at the Haystack Mountain School of Craft, in the summer of 2007. And that was kind of the turning point for me, where I came back from that and I started applying to graduate school. I sort of think of that as a big shift in my approach and kind of mindset in general. So that set in motion kind of the work that we're going to go through today. My time in graduate school was, I'd say, pretty life-changing, and set me on the path to the work I'm making right now. I came here in San Diego State specifically to work at the time. Wendy Mariama, who's here also, I believe. Hi, Wendy. Was still teaching here, and I came here to work with Wendy, and I had seen the alum who had gone through this program, and I was really excited about the kind of weird variety of work that was coming out of it. And so I moved here to do that. And I think that from the moment I arrived, the work you're going to see kind of reflects the change in my thinking from that moment on. Sorry. So that work took a great inspiration from actually my first trip across the country, which is how, when I came to graduate school, I drove myself across the country alone in a car with all my possessions, and had never done that before. And I was so inspired and kind of moved by the West in particular, and these kind of wide open spaces, that my work very quickly took on an element of sort of imagining relationships between objects and people and landscapes and our environment. So one of the key themes that runs through all of this work is sort of, there's this three-way relationship, I believe, between people and the objects that we surround ourselves with, whether furniture or architecture or other functional goods, and our environment, our landscape. So I kind of try to make these objects that serve, at least in these first series you'll see, that serve as intermediaries in a way between ourselves and our landscapes and our environments. And I pretty quickly started working in the desert. When I moved here, I was really inspired by the open space of the desert. This is what I think of as kind of the first piece in the body of work that I still kind of imagine myself working on. This is called Drift. It's photographed in a swimming pool in San Diego. But this is the start for me of making work that's sort of intended to, there are multiple stages. There's the imagining of the object and the creation of it physically. And then they're generally made to break down and be placed in different settings. And so they're kind of a way for me to imagine, how does changing context affect an object? How do those new objects being introduced affect our perception of that place, that space? And how does that make us think differently about that space and our own everyday environments and objects? So this piece was set up in a variety of places. You may have seen, this is it. I floated it in the Salton Sea. This is it alongside the Salton Sea. And this is it in a swimming pool here in San Diego. And it's also the start for me of a kind of inkling, which comes up much more later, and you'll see, but that the photograph may be the final product of this work. It's not to say that the object is not important, but that the image of it on location actually is what completes the object. This was a piece from around the same time called Extendo Bed. It's two oak extension ladders with a single bed. They're serving as the head and footboards, and it can be adjusted about to 15 feet. And again, this is it in Box Canyon in the Southern California near the Salton Sea. Thinking about this idea of kind of navigating these harsh environments on our own and having to be face to face and alone in a not necessarily friendly environment. thinking about this is a wash that floods when it rains, thinking about having to get out of the way of that, thinking about being alone in this object is a little terrifying to me. There's a theme that runs through this work also. I am interested in playing with the kind of fear of that relationship between myself and spaces that are not necessarily friendly to us. I like that play of a kind of confronting a fear through at times what I think of as a little bit of a sense of humor. So those two works were made while I was in graduate school, and they really kind of directed everywhere I've gone since. I have essentially, ever since that time, been exploring how I can relate objects to the spaces that I put them in, and the photograph as the kind of document of that. So this is from a series of objects I made as artist in residence at UW-Madison. I spent 4 months there in their furniture program in 2015, I think. And this started, this series of work, it's called Itinerant Landmarks. And so it's playing with a lot of kind of familiar objects. Signage is represented here. I'm very interested in like wayfinding and signage. Looking at surveil equipment and these kind of mobile objects designed specifically to like take stock of the land and our surroundings. So I was looking at like surveyor tripods with these. These are a set of weather vanes. So they spin with the wind, and they're set up on these tripods that can be raised and lowered to something like 12 feet tall, high enough to catch a little more wind. And they point in opposite directions. So they're weighted arrows that one says to, one says from, and they're always telling you where to go and where you're coming from based on the way that the wind blows. So this is called Itinerant Landmarks as the wind blows. And while I was there, I was starting to experiment with how a variety of locations really helps you think about these objects and changes the way that they speak to you. So what happens when these things get dropped into an urban setting or put out in a field, in the rural setting, in the desert? How do we think differently about our spaces and our familiar objects as a result of that? So this is the Capitol building in Wisconsin. And I set this up in a variety of places there, kind of just, this was almost, these photographs are like from my kind of first experiments of that piece on a variety of sites. Here it is, driving back, this is a little grainy, I'm sorry. Driving back from Wisconsin after my residency, I stopped along the way. At the time I was living in Maine, and I stopped along the way and photographed it in a number of places. This is in Indiana, in a field in Indiana. It's early winter at this point. And I really like the way these things kind of disappear into this dry field. Those are mirrored, so they actually are reflecting the sky. It's a little hard to see. So at times they sort of disappear and then give you this glint, but you can always see the wording. And this is also the beginning for me of sort of thinking about, as these surveil objects, thinking about the crate as a part of the work. So the work folds up, it comes apart, and me and a helper of some sort can haul that out into the field and set it up and then take it back down. So it's sort of like the photo shoot happens and these things get put back into their crate. The crate is often shown along with the work. So I will show the object, the crate, and this image of it out on location somewhere. This is just this sort of seeds of that sort of three-part relationship. This is another from that series. This is Itinerant Landmark also. This one's called Waterfront. This was started at that Madison, Wisconsin residency also. And at the time I was just thinking about the fact that if you've ever been to Madison, it's on an isthmus. It's between two lakes. And so I was sort of thinking about this as a sort of a joke, is this idea of a double-ended arrow that's just pointing to both lakes. It's pointing, I would align it east and west. I think that's the direction the lakes are in. I can't recall actually. And so it was like pointing at both of the lakes and saying waterfront. I was thinking of this as a land buoy. It's a rocking object. It's about 7 feet tall. And they have a neon lab there. So I got to work with a neon artist, and it was really exciting to kind of bring in this other electrical element to this. So it's sort of playing again off of signage. But the more I thought about this, the more I also was thinking about the level of discomfort I had living in the middle of the country at the time. I grew up on the East Coast. I had spent time on the West Coast. There's something sort of disconcerting to me about being in the middle. I don't know what that is, but distance from oceans makes me feel icky. So I was also thinking about pointing at the oceans, and also thinking about, and you may notice this in the last one, the kind of idea of vague signage that is like always right. So in this case, it's always pointing at water, no matter what way you arrange it. Every arrow is always pointing at water. And it sort of just rocks in the wind. This is it on a lake in Gray, Maine. And this is where the first time I actually brought in a photographer to work with me. This is photographed by Michael Wilson. And we kind of went out together, set it up, and had a day and an evening just photographing this thing out on the ice. And he was sort of like, I remember him shooting this and saying, we'll just Photoshop out that generator, and just saying like, don't you touch that generator. That's like very important to me, the sort of honesty of this and it being foregrounded. I really loved this image where that thing really just becomes a kind of sign off in the distance. This is it earlier in the day on a different site. And I just love this photograph. He mostly photographs portraiture. He does portraiture a lot. And this guy was sort of there ice fishing and was interested in what we were doing. And Michael said, can we photograph you? And he just kind of hung out and got involved in our photo shoot. So when I show this work, I'll often hang one of these images, generally this one. I print these at about 5 feet in the longest direction. They're large digital prints, sometimes mounted on foam or just kind of minimally mounted. Just from the same photo shoot. That was the shanty that someone was fishing out of. Again, he was really, really excited to Photoshop out my generator. I asked him not to touch it. This is a blurry image, but this is that piece broken down into its crate. So that uses these little thumb screws, and it comes apart into all of its individual pieces. I was looking a lot at like radio towers and the kind of simple grid structures that create strong yet minimal forms. And so this was kind of playing with like bell buoys and radio towers and high tension power lines and things like that. So these crates are heavy, but they're made to be kind of durable. I ship them to shows in these, but they're also kind of part of the work. And this is kind of, you can see where it mounts the neon part. That was one of those failed experiments for the first few rounds. That broke every time I shipped it to a show. I finally got it figured out, and every time it works out. So that work was made while living in Maine and attending this residency. I'd been teaching at the Maine College of Art for a couple of years and had started a teaching position at UMass Dartmouth and left that to do that residency. It's a really interesting job, but it was short term, and I really wanted to kind of make work exclusively. So I stopped teaching full time, did that residency, and then moved back to Maine and started this series. This is a series called Staying Put, and it was started on a grant from the Maine Arts Commission, just a small project grant, and kind of picks up where some of that work had left off. This is a couple of years, this is a year later, and this is a found furniture set. So this is like a white oak Craigslist find, mounted on a custom set of floats that I built. So this is a single central float, and then these 4 articulating floats coming off the side. So each chair is on its own float. And they all kind of dismount, and this can be taken to various locations and photographed out in the ocean. I think that my mom and dad are here, and they helped with the this one quite a bit. They live in Maine, and I was living in Maine, and they live up in Rockland. So I would go up there, and we would go out on the water and like photograph this thing. It was really fun. Make friends with lobstermen as they boated past. So this is it at the Rockland lighthouse. You can see the lighthouse sort of off in the distance, and this is out in the Rockland Harbor. So this one as well was sort of anchored in place, and I would get video and photographs of it out at sea and in different locations. And so this is called Staying Put, and it uses the language of nautical flag language. So I'm looking at this blue and white cross, and that's from a nautical flag. That means my vessel is stopped and making no way in the water. And this thing is intentionally empty as much of my work. And it kind of is meant to kind of place you in your mind out in this space. So this piece in particular really only ends up existing beyond this moment as a photograph. It's about 10 feet in diameter. It's difficult to move around. And it also starts self-destructing. We take it out in the water, and it was breaking down over time. So some of my work I make specifically to collect the documentation, and then I let that piece move on. This one was dismantled and thrown out, but not before getting some photographs of it in a variety of locations. We took it on the St. George River and floated it there and took photographs of it. And this was specifically done for an exhibition at Space Gallery. And it was the first show that I started showing these large prints. And it was this interesting photographic prints. It was this, in a way, I thought of it as the final product, but it's also a sellable object, which is something that I'm not really used to doing. As you look through here, it's not work that mostly people could put in their living room or on their walls. But the photograph was this interesting, tangible take-home product. So this show was shown surrounding the gallery with photographs with an aligned horizon line. So you could kind of walk in the room and get this sense of kind of looking out across the sea at this horizon with this object floating in each of those images. And then the thing itself was in the middle of the floor with its anchor there. This is sort of representative of another thing I like to do, which is kind of play with context and scale in the work. So I like that. So you look at these photographs, and it sort of turns this thing into a miniature in your mind, looking at it in this vast open space. I showed it at some point at the Maine Center for Contemporary Art, and they showed it in a swimming pool, an inflatable swimming pool. So suddenly it completely flips the scale perspective that you have, and it is completely filling this inflatable pool. And you see the photographs inside, and you start to ask yourself, like, what the actual scale of the photographs is, and how that kind of changes your perspective of that object and the spaces it's in. There's an image at the end of this I'll show you that was the initial seed for this idea. So one thing I've been doing is continuing on with this itinerant landmarks series, and it's kind of been something that I come back to. The Staying Put, for instance, was a body of work that I took a break from this to build that, and it was about a year of just working on that. But I keep coming back to these itinerant landmarks. And so this piece is photographed here in San Diego since moving back in 2016. This is a 10-foot long barricade, but referencing a folding ruler and a level. So this is a functioning bubble level that's made out of 2-inch glass. And the barricade has these adjustable feet. So I can take it out on location. Again, thinking about like the kind of surveil tool, the taking stock of the landscape, and also kind of like taking scientific readings from it in a way, the way that surveyors do. I really like the idea of like trying to correct this thing. So I bring it out on site and then I adjust the legs until the bubble is level. I love these kind of like iconic objects like the barricade. I think a lot about what it means to restrict people's access to space. This thing is this kind of, it's not an especially insidious object until it's used in the wrong way. And I like that play can happen there, that this can be a kind of playful, fun object, but also potentially represent something a little more serious. So this is this is along a section of the border with Mexico. This is in Campo. And this is the road that Border Patrol drives up and down as they survey and monitor the border. It's been really interesting bringing this work that started developing out in New England on the ocean, bringing it to the border region and back into the desert, but also like now having more of a sense that I'm in this space kind of in the on the edge of a country, in the space between two countries that's very contentious at the moment. So this folds in half like an old school wooden ruler. It has a big hinge that's based on these brass hinges that they would use to make those. The legs come off, and this folds again into like a crate that can be taken out into the world. This is an early photo of it, right? Overlooking the mountains in Mexico. So the wall is sort of down in there somewhere, and that's Mexico. Another kind of side track in this work that I've taken, I've shown this about 4 times in various iterations, but this is called a simple machine. And it kind of was one of the first projects that got me thinking about kind of overtly political statements. I've often kind of played around those ideas, but they were sort of secondary to these kind of personal experiences of landscape and experiences with familiar objects. This was developed for a show at the Maine College of Art at the Institute for Contemporary Art there that was called Tinderbox. And the idea was, this was at the beginning of 2016. The idea was that everyone in the show was kind of asked to respond to what at the time were some current events, basically, what was happening in the news. And it was right at a moment of, we were seeing a lot about police brutality and Black Lives Matter was becoming sort of more prominent. And I had been thinking about systematic violence, and I think of everything as filtered through my relationship to objects. I've loved the sawhorse as an object forever. Some of that is just this kind of aesthetic obsession with it. It's this like incredibly structurally sound form that manages to be so simple and functional and utilitarian. I sort of think about growing up around job sites that my dad was working on, and the sawhorse is this like ubiquitous symbol of work. And so I made this grid in the gallery. I think there were 36 of them. You don't see them all here. But the idea was that I arranged this grid of sawhorses, and over the course of an exhibition, I built this object that is just a sawhorse destroyer. And every day or every week, depending on the exhibition and how long the run is, I would come in before the gallery opened and break another one, and then move the breaker down the line to the next sawhorse with this kind of like sense of impending dread hovering over it for that day. And then the last one is broken the closing day of the exhibition. I don't think of these as performances. I kind of do it while the galleries are closed. I like that you might come in multiple times and notice that this thing is expanding. There was some really interesting video made of this from the security cameras that I really enjoyed. So this is just a image of me breaking one of them. It's really this kind of like difficult act. The way I built these, they're incredibly strong. So I would kind of go in and you would hear this bang as the thing finally cracked the back of these. And you can see to the right there that they're left in place, and some of them actually just collapsed in these piles of broken pieces, and some would kind of just stand there. So I was thinking about systematic violence and oppression, and you know, these things are hard not to see as kind of symbolic of working class and this like machine that works its way slowly down the line, destroying them on a very scheduled, systematic way. This is another version of that shown at the Institute for Contemporary Art here in San Diego. This was a shorter exhibition. I kind of was interested in like the factory floor. So I started taping out these grids, thinking about like safety lines and like how the modern factory works. So this thing works its way just down this line. I think one was broken every week over the course of this exhibition. And this is also the first one where like a gallerist would come in the morning and break one and move it down the line. I didn't have to do it myself. It's like, I guess that means I had made it. So the reason I talk about that piece, but right before this, is that I really think of that as having informed where I'm at right now. And it's a big leap from a lot of this itinerant landmark work and these sort of outdoor, not site specific, but kind of place referencing works. It's also sort of a shift back to my furniture roots and my love of making things accurately and carefully like I did when I was more actively making furniture. So this is a series of work that I'm currently expanding, but it's called Ordinary Rendition. The title is a play on extraordinary rendition, this idea of spiriting people away to often sort of black sites to interrogate them, that really started, became a part of our consciousness when we were in the start of this whole war on terror in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I started college the week of 9/11, and the reason that I studied international relations was that event. It made me think that somehow I was going to, by getting a better understanding of what was happening in the world, I might be able to help or at least be an informed citizen as a result. But it's always stuck with me, that time in my life. And I think it took me a long time to come around to sort of feeling comfortable addressing it. I want, like, to be totally clear, this is not work about 9/11 or about American wars. That's just kind of where it started. This was the first piece in the series. So this is called Ordinary Rendition Waterboard. And so the idea here is that I am playing this kind of line of contemporary furniture off of current and historical torture devices, and playing comfort and discomfort and the kind of horrors of war against our domestic setting. The idea here is, as you'll see, there's a visual sort of theme that runs through it. This was started in 2017, and I had spent some time at the various furniture fairs in New York that year. In particular, I had been to the Wanted design at the Armory in New York, and there was a room full of Dutch furniture from really cool young designers and makers. And I was sort of looking at the themes that were trending at the moment, and I wanted to tap into those kind of short-lived trend patterns. So this color is based on what everyone was talking about, millennial pink, this kind of shifting color that was hard to define, this kind of bodily versions of them are kind of pink and some are kind of mauve and some are in between. And so I was trying to play with that color, and there were a lot of these kind of clean curves and clean lines. And I really wanted to reference all of that to try to make this feel like something that you could imagine in a kind of contemporary domestic space. And I'm kind of playing with this idea of like desiring these objects as status symbols and that we live with, and bouncing that off of something really painful, which is incredible violence in pursuit of gaining knowledge about something. I was particularly not interested in objects designed to kill people so much as used to extract information or to invent a kind of storyline that may not exist. If you don't know how a waterboard works, this is how a waterboard works. Another part of this, though, was something that I've been playing with all through this work, which is context, I think, is everything. I don't necessarily love my objects being photographed in the white room. I think it takes a lot away from it, and they really require context. So I worked with a photographer named John Hogan, who, this is actually his house. He has this really fantastic house here in San Diego. And we photographed several of them in his space, kind of thinking of them. I was at the time I made a catalog, which I'll show you here. And the catalog was meant to kind of play off of the Blue Dot catalog, these kind of hip, small, it's more like a zine than a catalog. It's kind of on this nice matte paper, and it only has like 20 pages to it. And it's just these really clean objects in these very specific, carefully arranged spaces. So this is photographed in that space. So you can trying to kind of make you imagine it as a furniture object, even though its real functionality is something much darker than that. This is from the same series. This is a stockade or a pillory. I was looking at pillories. Again, thinking about not just the kind of hurting people physically, but this idea of objects that were designed to humiliate also. The breaking down of human will through violence. As I'm looking at this stuff, I'm sort of trying to relate everything to our current time, and we're awash in visuals of really horrific violence. And I wanted to play off of that kind of growing level of comfort with physical violence to a point where we just stop even noticing it. So just imagining these things like filling your home and just kind of being a part of the fabric of your life. This is just a great image I found of a pillory, but thinking about the kind of humiliation that was involved in this process of breaking people down physically and mentally. And these were so that series started with 4 objects, and these were the last 2. This is a set kind of playing off of like coat racks, but one is an adjustable whipping post and the other is a garrote. So the whipping post here, the hands are locked in this, and these are these wooden threaded rods. And so this can be adjusted, and you can sort of see it as you walk up to it, that this thing can be brought down to any level. And the garrote is, this is sort of a device that often, there are a lot of different variations on it, but it was cranked into the back of the neck usually. Something went over the head. It's also often linked to what was called a scold's bridle, which was a device that mostly women were forced to wear. Often if they were thought to be witches or gossips, they would have to wear this thing around that put often like a spike or something in their mouth. It's like a cage over the head or around the neck. And they were forced to go around town wearing this thing. So it was as much about physically attacking as it was about making sure everyone knew the great sin they had partaken in. So these are some images of the catalog. It's just this kind of small catalog that was made. John Hogan took all the photographs. The catalog was designed by a colleague of mine named Arzu Ozkal, who's a great graphic designer here in San Diego. There's a short essay that I wrote, and there's an essay in here by a colleague of mine named Matthew Hebert. This is the pillory photographed in another a home setting, a living room. So this is this is the most recent piece that I've finished. And as you can see, I kind of bounce around and then back to other series of work. This is a functioning croquet mallet and ball. I was invited to be in an exhibition at this Center for Furniture Craftsmanship in Maine. Has a gallery called the Messler Gallery. And this seems very much more lighthearted than the last series of work, but wait, just wait. This show is it's called Out of Bounds, and it's a series of artist interpretations of the croquet, mallet, and ball. So that institution, the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship, has historically people in their downtime while they're working there, they play these games of croquet, and they've started making sets. And it's something that I teach in my beginning furniture classes. Is the first project we make is this carved croquet mallet. And then our critique, instead of sort of sitting around a stuffy room and talking about these objects, our critique is a croquet match, like a 20-person croquet match. So I'm really, I'm a big lover of this game and this project. I've been doing it for a while. And when I was invited to this show, I was like really kind of torn about how I address it, because I really like to try to put some layers in my work and some history behind it. So this is it hanging on the wall. This is AstroTurf and beach and paint. And this piece, you can see the mallet itself is sort of set down in the grass. This is called Ghost Mallet for the Watertown 8. And this is a reference to a story that I found in the New York Times. I was researching croquet, like histories of croquet. I had sort of been thinking about what's the colonial history of this game and of the objects that you use to play it, the mallets, the balls, like what I knew that it was linked to this colonial past and had become this kind of fun pastime lawn game. But it had a lot of different histories. But one of the most interesting stories I found was this story from the New York Times from the summer of 1922. 8 kids, young kids, I think the oldest was 13, but down to like 10 years old, were playing croquet in Watertown, New York. And one of them struck an unexploded ordnance, and all 8 of them were killed in this croquet match. And it was in an area in Watertown where apparently the local, I don't know what arm of the military it was, but they basically did live ordnance practice in the area. And then they would neglect to clean up all the ordnance. Some of them would be duds, they would think, and they would kind of leave them around, and people would like pick them up and take them places with them. And so they were scattered all around Watertown, these unexploded ordnance. And one of the kids playing in Watertown in 1922 hit it, and they were all killed immediately. And it's this kind of really dark history. And I was thinking about this sort of tragedy linked to this really kind of mild pastime that I grew up really loving to play. And I've thought of myself playing this as a little kid at my grandparents' house in Cape Cod, which we did. That was like part of our time there. We would get out the croquet mallets and play. And so I kind of wanted to memorialize them. There are 8 posts here representing each of those kids. And it's set down into the ground, and it's all whitewashed. So you can kind of see the grain through this. And I had been thinking about the ghost bikes in cities around the country. I first saw them in New York, but I think it's spread everywhere. And at intersections where cyclists are killed riding, they paint these white bikes and they lock them to the signposts. And so I was kind of thinking of that. So this is the Ghost Mallet for the Watertown 8. And it's part of this great exhibition at the Messler Gallery. I really recommend you check it out. They've done a really great virtual gallery that you can kind of navigate through the actual space. They took 3D images of it. It's really well done. So that's my most recent project. And I wanted to talk about one more thing that's like a passion project, side project that I've been working on since 2018. I do a lot of collaborative projects. I really like working with other people, especially when it's kind of outside my wheelhouse. And I've done some small scale publishing in the past. I was briefly ran a branch of this thing called Publication Studio, which is like a print on demand publishing organization. And when I moved to San Diego, I had to kind of stop doing that, but I wanted to maintain, I'm interested in publication. And my friend and colleague, Carrie Ann, imagined this new project that's called Craft Desert that's been running since 2018. That's the Instagram, if you feel like following it. Craft Desert is kind of a zine. We make these by hand in limited editions, and it's subscription based only. So people sign up for at least a year and you get 2 issues per year. The first issue we wrote ourselves. And so generally we have 2 major essays, which are sort of interviews with someone doing something interesting in the field. And we have then like a guest artist spot. So for the first issue, we each wrote an essay, and our guest artist was Paul Sakaridis, who's the director of the Haystack Mountain School of Craft. The first edition was made during a residency there. And since then, we are on our 6th issue, and we have a subscription base of about 100 people. And twice a year, we kind of drop everything we're doing and we put this together. After the first issue, we started bringing in writers. This isn't really about our voice in the field so much as representing as broad a swath of our field as possible. So we're kind of thinking about what constitutes craft broadly. That's the theme of this, and the mission of this project is craft often gets thought of as this kind of like it's woodworking, it's fiber work, it's metal working, it's these kind of media based practices. But I actually think of craft, and Carrie Ann and I both together, we think of craft as a kind of mindset and process. So we have written about everything from a fantastic photographer named Scott B. Davis, who builds his own cameras and takes them out into the desert and does these long night exposures in the desert, makes his own paper and has this amazing printing process in his backyard. And to me, that's as much a craft as I can really imagine. If you look at this lower one, this pair of roller skates, that issue was specifically about people who are passing along the art of hand pinstriping lowriders in Los Angeles. We try to focus on this kind of Southern California desert border region generally. And it's really an attempt to kind of say like craft is actually this really broad set of practices that is not so easily defined, but unites this variety of practices in a way that we might not have thought about in the past. So Craft Desert is like one of my favorite ongoing projects, and I encourage you to check it out if you get a chance. We have about 100 subscribers, and we make them by hand. So it's kind of we think of our process in this as participating in a craft dialogue as well. This object is really satisfying. I have a coil binder. These are based on like shop manuals and instructional manuals. They're very sort of simple but carefully designed, and there is no digital version of this. You either subscribe and get one or you don't. We only make enough for the subscribers, and we want it to be experienced as a physical object in a world where that's sort of less common. And these are just a couple of those issues. This one cover was done by a local artist. We've been working with some illustrators and cartoonists lately, trying to bring in some more like recurring elements. Every issue has a piece of swag that's like some kind of Craft Desert branding, but also like you can take with you. And one of them, if you look here, was this one in the upper right-hand corner. The issue was themed Drive. This is an air freshener, and it comes with a set of instructions on how to apply a scent to it and hang it from your rear view mirror. But this is like kind of one of my favorite projects right now. And that is where I am currently at in my work. This is a model from the Staying Put project. This is the first version of that piece. Almost everything I make starts as like a doll scale model. This one found its way into my bathtub, and that's it. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and to Seth and the Maloof. I'd love to answer any questions if people have them. I see clapping. It's silent.
Yes, very good.
Thanks,
I'll clap because everybody can hear me. Okay, awesome. So thank you. That's amazing. It's great to learn more about your work. And we already have a few questions in the chat box. Thank you for those of you who are writing your questions, and if you have or just compliments to Adam, but keep writing those, and we'll get started with we have a question from Jane, who says, your work in context seems so important, and photography is a part of that presentation. Your photography reminds me of Walter Cotton, who taught at SDSU for many years. Are you aware of his work? And if so, is there an influence?
It's funny, I see Jeff shaking his head because I think he worked with Walt. I never met Walt. Walt died the year before I got to graduate school, which was really a shame because some of my classmates had worked really closely with him. But I've since seen his work, and it's kind of, I feel like there are a lot of people that I teach with right now who I worked with in graduate school who had a similar, like the desert was calling to them. But I was definitely inspired by what I saw of Walt's, as well as some other faculty members who were his colleagues at the time. That was all like percolating in there. Yeah. He was spending time out in the bombing ranges, I know, photographing, and he would bring students. It's like stuff of legend. If you were there, I'm sure you spent some time with Walt in the desert. Purely academic.
Okay, and Kiera asks, do you get permission to install objects in these spaces? How long are they in situ? Or is it that you place them, photograph them, and then deinstall? Does an audience get a chance to visit the pieces? And regardless of the answer, what does that mean to you in regards to the importance of place for these objects?
That's a great question. I've toyed with the sort of more permanent version of these. I've never asked permission. Somewhere early on, someone told me to ask forgiveness, not permission. I don't really affect the space that I'm setting things up in very much. And I found at some point pretty early on that I was more interested in these things traveling and finding a variety of locations than in the kind of permanent plop art site specific work. I was sort of thinking more about how they affect a variety of spaces than finding a location that was like made for it, where it was home. I have done some sort of guerrilla permanent installations, but mostly I'm interested in their temporary nature in those spaces. So mostly people don't get a chance to engage with them on site. That's what that's the purpose that the photograph serves.
That kind of ties into something I was wondering about, especially with the ordinary rendition pieces and audience engagement. And do people ever have a chance to, use the objects?
No, not those ones. I've only shown those a couple of times. They are structurally sound and that would work, but I've not had a gallery yet very interested in torturing any of their viewers on site. But
yeah, well, I didn't mean necessarily torturing, but just maybe just like laying on the waterboard or something.
I feel like if we're going to use them, we need to use them for what they're for. So no, nobody gets on the waterboard. It's actually really hard to get on because it's it looks like a kind of lounge, but it operates on a single pivot. It's meant to be able to be moved really easily. So because the head needs to be lower than the feet in order to waterboard. So it's not something that you could really comfortably or easily be on, because it's hard to even get onto.
And Steven is asking, are these pieces entirely made by you, or are they an assemblage of parts found or purchased and that which you've made?
I make most everything, but I do buy things. I mean, I feel like there are times when the meaning of the piece is actually more clear if like a specific found object is used. For instance, the staying put piece, that is like this really standard dining set that to me feels like a million homes I've been in. And I could obviously, I could make that, but to me, like having something aged that feels like someone's lived around it and had a million meals with their family around it actually helps the idea of the piece. But for the most part, I make the work. Like the most recent things I've been doing are not, there's nothing found in those. I like to make things. So if I can, I do.
And so I'm really interested in the crates, and I'm wondering about your kind of decision-making process. So you're making the crates with the idea that they will be shown along with the piece. So do you feel like your approach is different, or do you try to just make it as you would a crate that wasn't shown in a gallery? Like, are you trying to just keep your mind and making a functional crate, or is it kind of like a different thought process?
You're getting at something that has been percolating for me for a while, because I love making crates more than anything else. Like, I honestly, if I were to quit doing everything I do, I would work for a museum and build high-end crates. I really like the process of the kind of knolling that happens, how you build out padding and systems of support. And so I build them as purely functional objects. It's some of them get shown and some don't. Some galleries, it takes up too much space to show the crate and the piece and the photograph. So the crate is the first thing to get pulled out. But I build them the same if I'm showing it or not. They're kind of overbuilt. They are the ultimate display of my OCD. I think Kathleen is probably in this room, and she'll come in and make fun of me every now and then for how obsessive I am about building these crates. But I build them the same way, basically, whatever they're being used for. If I'm just shipping a piece and building a crate for it, they're kind of similarly over the top. As a person who's installed art also, there's nothing worse than getting a badly packed piece. So I really like to build a crate that supports it well, and a system that lets you sort of easily work through it, and a set of instructions. And to me, that whole language is really satisfying.
Yes, I too appreciate a well-packed and built crate. And so the crates they're sort of they're like furniture, right? And so your objects that are being created are, instead of a human body, you're, supporting things where they need to be supported, and you're making them a comfortable little place to sit, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have to imagine how badly these things will be treated when they get sent across the country or something. Lately I've been showing more outside of California than regionally, and you just have no idea how people are going to treat the work on route. So imagine that thing being dropped on its end off of the top of another crate. And so I want my piece to come out of that without any impact from that.
It reminds me of the egg drop. Did you ever design an egg drop?
Yep.
Okay, Tom, as I know him, asks, are the lovely crates Baltic birch or Home Depot plywood?
Baltic birch. Yeah, Baltic birch and clear pine.
Nice. And Barbara is asking if she says, can you give us a peek into what you are currently working on? I'm guessing she might be talking about in your space there.
Hi, Barbara. I'm currently working on being totally stressed out by teaching all the time, but I have been doing a lot of kind of fun little projects that I use as teaching tools. So one of the things I'm more excited about lately is Lauren is here, who's in my advanced class. There might be somebody else, but I've been making these planes in preparation to teach plane making, and I'd never done it. And they're these wooden block planes. They're based on this, like, the Krenov School at the College of the Redwoods assigns these. And so I know Laura Mays, who runs that program, and I reached out to her and was like, tell me about this plane project. So I've made several of these recently just in preparation to teach them. I've been doing a lot of these like tools. I've been making a lot of brushes and dust pans and like functional objects that keep my hands busy and also I can use as teaching tools. So my class was going to be building some little hand brooms, and I've been trying to design projects that they can do from home because we've been kicked out, then allowed back in, then kicked back out. So the most satisfying thing I've been doing is just like preparing for that by doing things like making tools for myself. The brushes have been really fun. I've been making, do I have any examples of my brushes? I don't have any of the ones that I've carved, but I also make these found object brushes. So they're like horsehair. These are badminton rackets. And I've been carving them and stuff as well, but I kind of just like keep these on my bench for cleanup of things, and just lots of little brushes. I've been making a lot of them, brooms and brushes, mostly horsehair. But I don't have a lot of examples of what I've been doing lately because it's been a dry spell. I won't lie.
Oh, I love the badminton handles. It makes me wonder if my painting process would change if I used tennis racket handles as a tennis player. That would
I'll send
change.
you a brush.
Awesome. And everyone, I put in the chat the website for Craft Desert.
These tennis
nice.
racket handles. I collect these wooden tennis rackets, so I just make tools out of them mostly. This is like my chisel mallet. This is a Wilson, really nice Wilson. I like the Wilson ones. They're sort of more, they're like an iconic. That's the kind of stuff, just like functional shop stuff.
I love that. All right, well, we should probably wrap it up there. Thanks so much, Adam. And thanks everybody for being here. Thanks again for making your donations. And go check out Craft Desert, craftdesert.org. Check out the zine. And any final words for us, Adam?
No, just thank you for having me, and thank you. There's all these great familiar faces out there that it's really nice to see. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.